I'm a biologist, and frequently am by myself in remote locations. This occurred when I was 26 and somewhere between green and seasoned. I was surveying wetlands in a remote area of the Appalachians, in an area dominated by thick pine forests. I always got on the county accessory site and printed off a map with landowner information so I wouldn't trespass. That'll get you shot. On this particular site, there was a private driveway going through U.S. Forest Service land, public, that let me get to this area a little quicker. This driveway was absolutely public property. At no point did I trespass. I pulled onto this road, clearly created by the USFS, and pulled off to the side about 30 yards from his private entry gate. My vehicle was a clearly marked state government vehicle. The forest is old-growth pine, but on the outer edges of the forest it's thick with undergrowth, forming kind of a wall before you get under the pines in a nice open understory. I walk about 200 yards in when nature calls, and I make like a bear in the woods and do my business. I'm a biologist, no biggie. Midway through, I hear yelling back at my truck. I think, great, now I have to deal with this. I'm wrapping up my business, getting ready to walk back to the truck, and I hear gunshots. I stopped walking and thought, yeah, I'm not walking back to that. I was at a loss of what exactly to do, and stood there for about a minute considering my options when I heard him breaking through the undergrowth on the edge of the forest. Shit, he's coming into the woods. Again, this is public property. I get a bad vibe. This is absolutely the type of area where people just straight up disappear. And they do. It's very, very remote, and the communities are very closed. This county has more than double the amount of game wardens of other counties, for a very good reason. I take off in a crouching jog, using my sense of direction to make it out to the main road about 600 yards away. More gunshots, except these have a crack to them. That means they're coming in my direction. There's no way he sees me, but maybe he's hearing me. Maybe he's firing above my head. Adrenaline kicks in 100% now, and I'm moving with a mix of terror and urgency to get to the main road. I eventually get to the main road and hide under a bridge. I call a colleague to give him the details of where I'm at so they can at least find my body, and then I call 911. This was the first time in my life I'd ever called 911. The 911 operator doesn't believe me, but eventually I get in touch with the deputy. He doesn't believe me either. They're probably just shooting at tin cans. Bullshit. It's Sunday night, 7 p.m., and he's too lazy to get off his ass. I move further away into a public hunting area, and a game warden stops in. God bless him. He took me seriously, and a few locals came by and comment how that landowner is an asshole. He was from Louisiana and not a local. I got along well with all the locals I had encountered, so that made more sense. After an hour, the deputy gives me a ride back to my state vehicle. The son of a bitch is parked on an ATV with a rifle laid across his lap, waiting for me in the dark. The deputy and I get out of the car, and I just walk straight to my truck and leave. It's almost 9 p.m., and I have a 4-hour drive to get home, and I just had enough. At the time, I didn't want to talk to the guy at all, but now I wish I had. Who knows what conversation the deputy and him had. After this, I quietly started carrying a firearm in the field with me at all times. I'm glad I trusted my gut feeling and insisted on calling a police escort back to my vehicle. That was not an encounter and conversation I wanted to have with someone with an overtly active trigger finger. I had all the guy's contact information from the county accessory site and thought about mailing him a map clearly stating where his property begins and ends, but I just let it go. Maybe he thought I was the creep. In the 80s, my aunt used to volunteer at a prison, teaching prisoners how to read. She was an elementary school teacher and cared a lot about education. She did this for a long time, until one of the prisoners became infatuated with her. It started out small by complimenting her, but then he began to tell her how in love with her he was, and how he was planning a life for them outside of prison. My aunt told the guards all of this, and they suggested she stop volunteering at the prison. On occasion, she would get phone calls from the prison and love letters. She would not accept the calls and didn't return his letters either. She went about her life ignoring him because he was behind bars and couldn't hurt her, until he escaped from prison. My aunt was out of town and got a call that he had escaped. She called the local police immediately and asked them to check her house with her when she returned home. My aunt lives alone in a ranch-style house, so the police surveyed the outside, the basement, and the main floor and found nothing. Her home security system was intact as well. She had a friend stay over that night, and everything seemed okay. Around 1 a.m. they heard scratching noises and called the police. They thought the noises were coming from her mother's empty bedroom. The police searched the outside of the house and the bedroom and found nothing. Around 2:30 they heard scratching noises again, and also the sound of footsteps. The police then checked the attic, which was more like a crawl space that my aunt used for storage. They found the prisoner crouched behind a box with a screwdriver, hacksaw blade, and 2 blades from a pair of hedge cutters. He got into the house by slitting a window screen that gave him access to the attic. He's still in prison and will be until he dies. Until recently, I worked at a very large children's hospital in the southern U.S. I am also transgender, present myself as female at work, and identify with my female pronouns and name. I've been doing this for 6 months now, openly. If you kept up with U.S. politics recently, we're pretty much a target in politics at this point for every nutjob who wants to make a name for themselves. My employers started out promising inclusivity, but since December had become far more toxic and far more hostile, including telling me to never correct anyone who misgenders me and to stop presenting as a female at work. I had made an effort to separate myself from several people who had made it their mission in life to harass me for my transition, one of whom had told my director that she would beat the shit out of me if she caught me around her at work. Others had gone so far as to dig up social media and FetLife accounts and spread them around people at work. 6 months of continuous provocation and intrusion in my life had taken a toll, and I had a particularly hard shift one night where I was deliberately mistreated and insulted. I made the mistake of venting about my dysphoria on Facebook and talking about mental illness and depression in EMS. I had completed my shift at Job A. I don't represent my employer on social media. I don't even have pictures of me in uniform for a reason, and had clocked out and started to go home. I was actually in line to get food for my female partner and I to try to have a sit-down dinner with her when I had my phone ring. It was dispatch, and I figured they thought I might have stayed late to chart, so they were calling for us to see if we could take a late transport. They informed me that there was a police officer looking for so-and-so, and that they needed to talk to me regarding a case. The dispatcher found it odd they used my dead name and even asked why they would know that. Since the officer had threatened to go to my house and arrest me if I didn't come back, I headed back. I made a phone call to my partner to make contact with police friends of ours should I not call in an hour. As I pulled in, I immediately noticed things which made me very uneasy. Keep in mind, this is where I worked. Everyone knew me for years, and I was in uniform presenting as female. This was an unmarked vehicle, not a DUI vehicle, regular unit, or a field supervisor. Probably investigation or narcotics based on the way the officer was dressed. As I walked back in, I was directed to the back ER, where this officer awaited me. "Hello, officer. How may I help you?" "Are you—" My dead name I never go by, not even my legal name. "Yes, I'm... How can I help you?" Sure. Let's go out here." We step out of the patient care area I work in so that we don't cause a scene in front of patients and family. I stopped at the elevator. It was a public area, well-traveled and with a camera. I wanted a witness to what I felt was about to happen. "May I ask what this is about? It's pretty highly irregular I get called back into work to talk to an investigator." He protested where I was talking to him, and I stood my ground and told him this was fine. I was not comfortable being alone with anyone right now. "I'm going to be blunt. You have people who are concerned enough about you to call me, and I want to take you somewhere that can help you. Will you let me do that?" At this point, I'm freaking out. Why did this guy think this? Why was he here? I notice his patches. He's canine. The coworker who said she was going to beat me was married to a canine cop. It was becoming clear. No. No, I will not. Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time." "Then I'm exercising my Fourth Amendment right to walk away. This conversation is over. Bye." I turn to move around him. He steps in front of me and puts his hand on his gun. "If you try to leave, I'm arresting you and having you involuntarily committed. I can't guarantee you aren't going to kill yourself." I stopped. I actually laughed. Really? This was happening? Let me start by saying the threat of being sent to our local mental health center for clearance is terrifying enough to me as a trans woman. There are very well-known horror stories about being stripped of dignity, dehumanized, having gender identity invalidated, and someone attempting to convince him he was insane at clearance because of dysphoria. All of the horror stories, the feelings of violent threats and poor care, all of that came rushing into me. It was clear now what was going on. This guy had tried to get me alone to give him probable cause to arrest me and take me to a mental hold. "If you touch me, I will sue the shit out of you and your department for violating my rights. I am not suicidal. I am not going to harm myself or anyone else, and I am not under arrest. I'm not going to sit here in my place of employment and have my psychiatric issues with my gender dysphoria treated as if it makes me a threat to anyone. You are not a physician, and you are not a psychologist. Do not try to diagnose me." I took a step back at this point, wanting to put distance between him and I. This guy is staring at me at this point, laughing at me. He easily has a foot of height on me, and he's used to intimidating people. At this point, I can see only being led away in cuffs, thrown in a mental hospital, and made to look insane. I'm terrified. Well, if you just admit that you need help for how you feel, I can take you to people and resources that can help. Why won't you just come with me? He's laughing at this point, sing-songing. There are people starting to watch us, thankfully. Patience and security. He noticed this and becomes increasingly more insistent. My blood is boiling at this point, fear and anger. I am getting help. I have an attending physician and a psychiatrist treating me for my gender dysphoria. I do not need your help. It's like it suddenly dawned on him between his instances on calling me sir, pet peeve, and the fake respect he gave me each time he barked at me to try to intimidate and assert his dominance over me. Why are you angry with me? I'm only trying to help you. He feigns concern. I'm angry with the way people treat me. You are a convenient target for that anger because you are sitting here calling me suicidal and mentally unstable. I'm sure you understand it's not personal. He shows me a picture. It's a Facebook post I had openly talked about how dysphoria is an insidious and disgusting thing, how it can make you suicidal and self-loathing. I'm trying to explain dysphoria and what it is, and he's grinning at me, looking at me as if I'm crazy. I finally stop, take a deep breath. I am not saying any more to you. I want to go home to my partner and enjoy the 6 hours off I have before I have to work job B on a 911 truck. Either arrest me or let me go. I will not consent to you civilly committing me for expressing my feelings. Then look me in the eye and tell me you're honestly not suicidal. I am not suicidal. He should have not been able to have that post. It was a restricted view. He gives up finally. He has lost his isolation and is now being witnessed by multiple people. He takes my license and information. Great. Now there's a record of me as an EDP in the county database. Wonderful. As soon as I get my license back, I turn around and walk off. Have a safe night, officer. As I walk back through to my car, people can see I'm furious. I'm humiliated, embarrassed, hurt. I'm terrified he's going to follow me, try to arrest me for some trumped-up reason. Had it not been for a paramedic friend talking to me, I'd never made it home, and I was so scared. The next day I call to file a report about the incident and complain. There is no record. No call put in the dispatch computer. No record or report of any contact with a police officer. He had done this as a personal favor to another canine cop, completely off the record, which scared me even more. What if he had taken me? Would I have ended up at the hospital for 24-hour hold? I have since resigned from my job, and am working for a more inclusive and tolerant company. But I had to end up flagging my home address for swatting with the local police department due to someone repeatedly calling in false armed party and suicidal individual calls to my resident for the next week. I grew up on the countryside, right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run. But 10-year-old me felt it was a stupid rule and did so anyways, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well I wasn't supposed to do that, and was caught a few times, but nothing much came of it apart from a half-hearted, "Don't do it again." And I did, of course, until one day something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the Forbidden Park. This day, very early morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was beautiful outdoors, misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early, before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on part of the trail that got steep on one side, leading down to the river, because the thought of one step too close to that edge was too much even for a kid with next to a non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something with the hooves? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hooves were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. That's when I saw it. Someone had set up a trap. A thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around, but didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it, and to do so I had to walk a bit up into the wooden area on the side of the trail. That's when I heard the singing. There is a song called Hej Tom Tagubar, and it was that melody, but the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, sniggering voice. Today I only remember parts of it, but translated it would have been something like,
"Hey, all you runners, come here passing, let the lifeblood pour out."
I, as silently as I could, with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails, so now I had a problem. The old stories about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was a cottage for the local hunter, came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got home and told my older brother what had happened, and he went back with me there. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole on the ground, right in the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called the police. The area was searched, and several similar traps found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there were big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water's surface, directly under that little tower you're supposed to dive from at the lake. They also found black garbage bags filled with big rocks, and they were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so that if a car hit it, it would risk the possibility of going off the road and into the water. That let me get to this area a little quicker. This driveway was absolutely public property. At no point did I trespass. I pulled onto this road, clearly created by the USFS, and pulled off to the side about 30 yards from his private entry gate. My vehicle was a clearly marked state government vehicle. The forest is old-growth pine, but on the outer edges of the forest, it's thick with undergrowth, forming kind of a wall before you get under the pines in a nice open understory. I walk about 200 yards in when nature calls, and I make like a bear in the woods and do my business. I'm a biologist, no biggie. Midway through, I hear yelling back at my truck. I think, great, now I have to deal with this. I'm wrapping up my business, getting ready to walk back to the truck, and I hear gunshots. I stopped walking and thought, yeah, I'm not walking back to that. I was at a loss of what exactly to do, and stood there for about a minute considering my road about 600 yards away. More gunshots, except these have a crack to them. That means they're coming in my direction. There's no way he sees me, but maybe he's hearing me. Maybe he's firing above my head. Adrenaline kicks in 100% now, and I'm moving with a mix of terror and urgency to get to the main road. I eventually get to the main road and hide under a bridge. I call a colleague to give him the details of where I'm at so they can at least find my body, and then options when I heard him breaking through the undergrowth on the edge of the forest. Shit, he's coming into the woods. Again, this is public property. I get a bad vibe. This is absolutely the type of area where people just straight up disappear. And they do. It's very, very remote, and the communities are very closed. This county has more than double the amount of game wardens of other counties, for a very good reason. I take off in a crouching jog, using my sense of direction to make it out to the main. I'm a biologist, and frequently am by myself in remote locations. This occurred when I was 26 and somewhere between green and seasoned. I was surveying wetlands in a remote area of the Appalachians, in an area dominated by thick pine forests. I always got on the county accessory site and printed off a map with landowner information so I wouldn't trespass. That'll get you shot. On this particular site, there was a private driveway going through U.S. Forest Service land, public.